Good morning, everyone. A very good morning to all of you, and welcome to FINSEC, and welcome to this scintillating session or masterclass, which is Achieving Defense in Depth Strategy, that is protect against the leading cause of breaches, compromised identities and credentials. This is brought to you by CyberArk, the leading experts in this field. And today we have a very brilliant panel here and an excellent set of sessions, which are a couple of presentations by the experts in this area. Sumit Srivastav, who is the Solutions Engineering Manager of India and SARC in CyberArk, and Jitsun Ong, who is a Security Architect, again in CyberArk, and followed by one panel discussion in which we have an excellent panel. So Mr. Rohan Vaidya, who is the Country Director of India and SARC region of CyberArk, will be there, and Mr. Dhananjay Khanna, CISO of SBI Cards, Mr. Srinivas Rao Mupaneni, Group CIO of Telangana's State Cooperative Banks, the collective banks. He heads at Apex Banks, he's the Group CIO, and Mr. Prakash Padaria, a CISO of PayU. So I'm sure you'll all be eager to listen to their insights in this area. And defense in depth strategy is, of course, a very, very strong method to keep it in check, a layered strategy, in fact, to keep out the attacks which are growing in scale and sophistication. So a little bit about DSCI. DSCI, as you know, Data Security Council of India, is the cybersecurity wing of NASSCOM. So anything in NASSCOM that pertains to cybersecurity and privacy falls under the purview of DSCI. And this is our signature conclave, especially for financial security, which happens once a year. So I urge you to attend not only this session, but all the other sessions as well, as it suits your area of interest and your focus. But there are a lot of insights from a lot of experts, excellent opportunities to network, and of course, a lot of good things come out of it, such as collaborations, deals, scaling for startups, investments, and so on. So DSCI runs several things. Very briefly, we have centers of excellence, one in Hyderabad, Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, and another in Noida, which is the National Center of Excellence. So we focus on startups as well as the other areas which are dealing with industry, large, medium, and small, and then the government, central government, state governments, law enforcement agencies, defense, and policy making. The third one is to do with academia and R&D. The fourth one to do with the user groups. We run something called use case clearinghouse workshops, as well as get many other insights from use case. We do industrial case studies and all. You're welcome to collaborate in any one of these areas. And then finally, we have collaborations, in which we're very rich in collaborations. We have collaborations, extensive collaborations in India and abroad through our ecosystems, the larger DSCI's ecosystems, NASSCOM's ecosystems, and the industry collaborations. So we welcome you to collaborate, participate, reach out to us in case you need anything, and we are always there to help. In these COVID times, the work from home has become prevalent, and of course, there are no boundaries. And how do you protect your networks? And that is really the topic of this whole session. How do you achieve a defense in depth strategy? So with that, hello, Rohan.
Good morning. How are you?
Yes, doing fine. Everybody is all eager and ready to go. All excited to hear you.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here, and thanks for everybody joining this early today. My name is Rohan Vaidya. I am the Country Director for India and SARC for CyberArk. CyberArk is about 7-8 years old now in India, and we have a fairly large spread of enterprise and government customers. The discussion that we would want to have is more on the identity security now, which is now becoming a new area of play for the hackers or the breaches which happen. This is an area where we probably looked at it in fragmented segments in the years. But eventually we started...
Rohan, you seem to be on mute.
I am not... Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So identity security is a new play that we realize. CyberArk has been into the privilege access management for about 20 years now. If I look at from an attack perspective, any successful breach, if you look at the forensic, you would realize that 95% of the successful breaches have happened because of compromised privilege accounts. And that is what I would say is the problem statement which CyberArk as an organization is able to address through technology and the products that we bring to the market. With the current scenario where everybody is now moving on to cloud, everybody is moving into a DevOps environment, there is a huge change in the way we work, which is work from home, work from anywhere. We have been breaking boundaries with the pandemic situation, which is there in terms of how we work. Security, to a certain extent, is taking a backseat in terms of making sure that the productivity of the employees have to be possible, not only just productivity, but also possible for employees to work in different environments. And it happened at such a sudden phase that we really did not have the time to do that. And on the other side, the bad community, which we would kind of call them as hackers, have been capitalizing, monetizing on this opportunity. And identity theft is becoming a large part of their play. So with this, I kind of introduce Sumit from my team, who would kind of run a small presentation with you in terms of what CyberArk could possibly do on the privilege access and identity security, and especially in the cloud era. Over to you, Sumit.
Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me and see my screen as well. So thanks, Rohan. Yeah. So thanks, Rohan, and welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, to this session where we are going to talk about securing your organization's crown jewels as well as the identity in the cloud. My name is Sumit Srivastava, and I head the solutioning and pre-sales for CyberArk India and SAARC. And as Rohan spoke about that, the recent times have brought about tremendous change. And while we know that this digital transformation has been around for over a decade, in fact, close to 2 decades now, but in the current times, this has taken a front seat, and the digital transformation, the way it's accelerated over the last year, has been tremendous. In fact, Gartner's report says that over 70% of the organizations who had already taken the cloud journey, they accelerated and increased their cloud spending in the wake of COVID-19. And some of them have done it like up to 10 times. So that's where digital transformation has become not only the driving force for doing better than the competition, but in the current scenario, it has become the talk about the existence. So whether a company is going to exist or not, that depends upon the digital transformation journey that they have started. And with that, in the current times, identity has become the new security battleground. As the transformation takes place, we are not looking at managing the shared accounts anymore. So we talk less and less about it. And we talk more about the increase in the and the explosion of the identities due to the digital transformation, right? We are talking about zero trust. Now, it's not about allowing a user to log on to the systems just because they have the password. We want to ensure that the user is verified. The person who is logging in is actually the person who's authorized to do so. We want to validate the devices they are using. We want to limit the access that they have to what exactly they need. And these planning assumptions are not unique to CyberArk, as identity is quickly becoming the new security battleground, right? But we are taking a unique security-first approach to have the advantage in the upcoming consolidation. We call it identity security. And this recognizes that the nature of privilege is rapidly changing and expanding in the current world. Now, with this digital transformation, the explosion of the identities, we see that the privileges are not restricted to the administrators anymore, which used to be a few years back. Now we have the accounts which are there in the DevOps, they are there with the developers, it's there in the CI/CD pipeline, it's there in the applications and robotic process automation frameworks, the third-party vendors who are logging in remotely to fix our issues, the workforce that is working within the office, working remotely. It's no more restricted to our office environment. It has now, the office environment itself has extended to working from home. If people are working from temporary locations, we hear about working from mountains, we hear about working from resorts. So it's now these access are being done from outside the office perimeter, and we need to secure all of it. It's right there in the hybrid environment. So it's there in the on-prem, it's there in the cloud, it's there in the hybrid. It's all about IaaS and PaaS, in infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, as well as the SaaS applications. Now, why is the privilege so important? Why is it so important that we have to manage all these privileges which are there in our organization, whether on-prem, on cloud? It's because over 80% of the breaches have been found to involve some sort of privileged credentials, either the lost or stolen credentials. And this is there as per Verizon's 2020 data breach investigations report. And in fact, their own CIO said that credential theft was the thing that kept him awake most of the nights. So this is the criticality of managing the privileged accounts in our organization. So while digital transformation has brought about a huge change in the way we have our IT landscape, the way we do a business, but the attack chain still remains the same. The way the hackers get into our organization, it's still the same as what they used to do when we were in a closed environment of our data centers. There are still the insider threat, there's still the external threat. So external threats are the hackers who try to get into the organization through a phishing attack. The insider threats, these are our own employees who have some sort of access, some sort of privileged access, which they can use to cause harm. And they still need to escalate their privileges. So as a normal user, they may not be able to cause harm, but when with the escalated privileges, with the privileged access, they can start looking around for required data, which is of value to the organization, which is of value to the hackers. And then they keep on moving from one system to the other until they find that data. And what do they do with that? They either exfiltrate it, that is, take it away with them, destroy it, or they encrypt and ask for ransom. And this is exactly where CyberArk fits in. So we protect your organization against such attacks by locking down these privileged accounts and not giving access to the insider or external threats. Talking about how CyberArk does it, so it's based upon three pillars. The And these are very simple stages that we do. So the first one is we identify and then secure and manage the credentials. So we identify all the privileged accounts which are there in your organizations. We discover those, we lock those down into our digital vault and automatically rotate the credentials. So what does it do? It ensures that no human being has the passwords anymore. The passwords are there with CyberArk Vault, and they are provided to the users when they need it. The users need the password to carry out their operational work. The Windows administrator needs the password to log on to their Windows server. Unix administrators need to log on to their Unix servers, right? Similarly, network admin or the cloud administrators, they want the password to carry out their work. They do not really need the password. That's not their primary job. So that's where we take away the passwords, but we allow them to connect to the target device and carry out their work. And when we allow them to do it, we monitor their sessions. We do the live monitoring of their sessions, as well as once the session is over, we keep the recording safely in our tamper-proof manner in our vault. And with the auditor access, we can pull out this recording later on to do the audit and ensure that we are compliant with all the regulatory norms. Now, along with session recording, we also isolate the session and control what commands the user or the administrator is allowed to fire. And we do real-time monitoring when the session is going on. So that's our third pillar. So I'll show how exactly we do it. So first of all, we discover the privileged accounts in your organization. We take these accounts and onboard them onto our vault, CyberArk Digital Vault. We automatically rotate those passwords. And whenever a user needs to connect to the target device, the vault provides the password and the user gets connected to their target device to carry out their operational tasks. Now we provide this onboarding of the accounts in an automated manner, and even the administrator can do it manually as well. So we can automatically detect the privileged accounts in your environment, and we can onboard those onto the CyberArk Vault. The session
Hi,
which
Sumit. Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you. Can you please reshare your slides?
Sorry about the glitch. So I'll just start recap this slide and then move ahead. So our CyberArk solution for privileged access management is based upon 3 pillars. The first one being securing and managing the credentials. So as part of this, we lock down the credentials in our CyberArk Digital Vault. Then we do the session recording. That's the session is where the user connects to their target device, to the server, Windows server, Unix server, or the network devices, firewall and all, to carry out their day-to-day work. And along with session recording, we also isolate the session between the user and the target device. We'll see that in the subsequent slide how we do it, and also control what commands the user can execute when they are logged onto their target devices. And all of this is monitored real time. And once the session is over, the recording goes and sits in a tamper-proof manner in the CyberArk Vault and can be viewed with the auditor access. So to start our journey for privileged access management, first of all, we discover the accounts, and we can discover these accounts automatically. And it can be done on your premises devices, cloud consoles, and all, right? And we can help you discover all those privileged accounts in your environment. As a next step, we onboard these accounts onto CyberArk Digital Vault. And once we have onboarded, we automatically rotate the credentials. And whenever the user wants to connect to their target device, the CyberArk Vault provides them with the password, and they get connected to their servers, network devices, and all. And here the users need not see the password. They can just click on connect and get connected to the target device, which secures the password itself. Like no humans knowing the password makes sure that the password itself is very secure. And all of it gets recorded. So whatever the user is doing when they log onto their target devices, the session is monitored live, as well as it is getting recorded. The user here is logging on to the cloud console, and once the session is over, it will go and sit in the vault. And this can be viewed later on with the auditor access, and the auditor can see what all was done as part of that session. So without a PAM solution, this is how a user or the administrator for server network devices would be accessing their systems. So the user would directly log on to their target device using RDP or PuTTY, SSH session and all, to directly connect to their target device and carry out their work. But then this is not a secure mechanism, because the external attackers, the hackers, they know that this is how the user are accessing, and that's where they send phishing attacks. They send the malware which gets installed on the user machine, and when they access the servers, this malware moves from their machine onto the servers and keeps on moving from one server to the other till it gets to the domain controller, and they can launch a golden ticket attack as well. So that's where it is highly recommended that we do not allow direct access to any servers, network devices and all. And the solution is to have the CyberArk's privilege access management solution in place. And here we have the administrator. We have the CyberArk implementation here. So we have the CyberArk password vault. Here is the privilege session manager or the jump host. And when the user wants to connect to their target devices, they log on to CyberArk's web portal. So there is a URL. So users just have to open up the URL in their browser and log in using multiple mechanisms which we provide. So it can be their AD user ID password or CyberArk authentication or any RSA ID based authentication, right? So here the user is using the AD ID and password, and once they are authenticated with their ID password, there is a built-in second factor of authentication. So we have a built-in MFA in our solution which ensures that we are authenticating the user. So here is the zero trust built into our solution. We are not just allowing anyone who knows the password to log in, because I can have a stolen password or somebody has shared the password with me. But once I have been asked to authenticate using my mobile device, I know that this is the person who is actually authorized to do so is logging in. So with this, we allow the access. Now, once the person is authenticated with the multi-factor, now they get a page which we have the web portal page, and this is where the list of the devices which the user has access to is given. Now, it will have the host names or IP addresses and also the accounts with which the user can log in. For example, a Unix machine, so they can have a root account as well as other accounts. And the user will select which account they want to log in with and the IP address of the account, and they can just click on the connect button. They need not see the password at all. And once they click on connect, our jump host, our privilege session manager, picks up the password from the vault and injects it into the target device. Now, the user need not know the password at all. In fact, they would never know the password because they are not getting the password. And in this case, even if there's a malware running on the user machine, the hacker will never get the password because the password is never reaching the user machine. Also, this malware will never go and infect the target devices because there's a hardened privilege session manager in between. So no passwords going to the end user machine, and no malware coming from end user machine and infecting the target devices. So this is how the session isolation prevents the target devices from the malware attacks. And all this is getting monitored live, and post session, it is getting, the recording is getting saved into the CyberArk vault. And we also implement the command control here, like for example, for our DBAs. Say if an L2 DBA, we do not want them to drop table, so we can put that command control restriction in place, right? So while in the previous slide we saw that there are network devices, servers, Windows servers, Unix and all, but then that's not just, our solution is not limited to only the on-prem devices or the network servers, right? We can secure the cloud environment as well. And as a minimum, what we see that the CISOs and CIOs would want to secure access to all the major public cloud providers with the bare minimum security for the root accounts, the individual identity accounts that are accessing cloud consoles, and the CLI-based access for their different cloud providers. And they do so because these are amongst the first that attackers try to gain control of. Apart from securing the console and the CLI, we can also see the security events in CyberArk with a mail notification that can go to the administrator. And you can onboard such accounts immediately so that any unmanaged or compromised IAM accounts which are there, they are secured quickly and immediately onto through CyberArk. And you can configure for automatically onboarding rules and rotate the password as well. And there are many more such controls and preventive techniques that are available. So these are just a few examples that we are talking about here. And for further discussions, we can definitely set up time with you individually if you are interested. And we can showcase the details on how we secure the on-prem as well as the cloud. And here is where the suspicion activity report can be run. We can see that, okay, what are the suspicious activities that have taken place, and we can take measures to control them. We can also detect high-risk privilege activities that are happening. And if we were to deep dive a bit on the CyberArk's detection capabilities, so you can detect unmanaged keys, IAM accounts, compromised IAM accounts which are there, the EC2 accounts, and we recommend that the action being taken immediately on these, right? So these are the various accounts which can be, which we can, quickly detect as well as onboard. So we can now see a quick video on how we can onboard the Cloud Console, AWS Console in CyberArk and secure the access of user through our secure connection. Yeah, so here's the video. So here the user John had logged on to the AWS console through CyberArk, and the user clicked on the connect button and the SSO connection initiated from CyberArk jump host. And if we see that while the user is an admin user, but we have not given them access to the S3 bucket. So that's the kind of granular control that we can put in place. even in the cloud environment, right? And we can onboard not only AWS, but also other cloud providers, cloud consoles as well. Yeah. So moving on to securing the cloud entities further. So CyberArk has, our R&D team has come up with a product known as Cloud Entitlements Manager. And this is where it is very important as a tool for our customers, for the organizations who have a multi-cloud environment in particular. So while we set up our users in the different cloud environments and we keep giving them access, but then over a period of time, it becomes very tough to identify who has access to what and how to ensure that the person has just the right amount of access that is needed for their jobs. And as part of a survey, it has been found that as organizations speed up their digital transformation journey, we find that there are over 90% of all malicious data breaches in the IBM cost of data breach report that involved misconfigured cloud servers. And that's tied with the stolen credentials. And also, why is that so challenging is because there are so many permissions to access services across the cloud environment. If you were to talk about individually, there are around 7,500 different permissions for AWS, over 5,000 for Azure, and over 3,000 for GCP. Now, if a customer, if say you are using multiple cloud environments, just imagine we are talking about over 20,000 if you have all the three environments with you, and how you can manage the permissions on these. It's humanly not possible. And the challenge is that if we do not secure these permissions, we do not ensure that the user has permissions that are required, it can lead to breaches and loss in terms of reputational loss to the organization, as well as in terms of dollars. And the average cost of a cloud misconfiguration data breach is $500,000 more than what it is for the on-prem. It doesn't mean that the on-prem is more secure than the cloud. It's just that the hackers are these days, they are targeting cloud environment a lot. And that's where it makes it imperative that we secure our cloud environment as well. I'll quickly walk you through an example of a breach, so how it happened. And this happened due to an issue with the firewall configuration. And so first, the attackers exploited a vulnerability and entered the financial institution's AWS environment. And then they connected to a virtual machine instance. Now, in this case, it was a misconfigured firewall, but it can be any other permission as well. So it could very well be compromising a legitimate user's credentials with a phishing attack, or in the case of an insider threat actor who already has the access, right? So the attacker assumed the role of the firewall that had been misconfigured. Then they executed the commands they were not supposed to. And what they did, they used the sync bucket command to copy the data from the S3 bucket of this organization onto their own S3 bucket. So the organization thought that, the customer thought, okay, everything is fine. Nobody's destroying the data. Nobody's doing anything with the data. But then the data was silently being copied onto another bucket in the cloud environment itself. And this is the exact challenge that Cloud Entitlements Manager is built to solve. The solution identifies unused and risky permissions for cloud identities that could be exploited by attackers, and then it remediates them with an AI-generated policy corrections. Least privilege is at the heart of the solution, and it uses AI to generate granular IAM policies that remove only excessive permissions that are not at all necessary and valid access is still preserved. So we only take out the access which is not required for that role, and we look at multiple ways into it as well, including that whether the access has been there for that permission for the past 90 days or not. And from a single console, centralized dashboard that we see here, we can interactively monitor as well as control across multiple cloud providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, as well as the EKS environment, right? And our solution uses thousands of logs and identify which permissions are being used. So it's a huge amount of analytics that goes into it. And cloud security teams can then model their exposure level, and it provides them with the remediation as well. It says that, okay, this is what they can do to remediate and bring the control onto the permissions that are given to their users. And it generates the YAML script which can be executed, and it's all automated. So it provides the remediation scripts as well for you to execute. So if we go back to our issue that we spoke about 2 slides back and look at the attack chain, now let's see how Cloud Entitlements Manager can defend against the internal and external threat vectors of excessive permissions. So first of all, the solution can detect and identify the excessive permissions that are there. Secondly, the solution can generate the code for a new, safer identity and access management policy based on the least privilege that removes excessive permissions from the users. And third, we can apply that new policy to implement least privilege and proactively defend the environment. And lastly, we can block additional attacks by removing those additional IAM policies that were in place, which are excessive and which are not required, to the same resource or to other resources for the same identity. So in this case, we have blocked the access to S3 bucket. And even if this the credentials are compromised for that user, if it's an internal threat or an external threat, they will not be able to get to the S3 bucket. They'll not be able to copy the data from here onto, say, another bucket of their own. Right. So this is how our solution protects you in the cloud environment, where you have multiple, even in case of multiple cloud environments or single cloud environment, and ensuring that the permissions are just right for the user access. And you can get started with the Cloud Entitlements Manager. You can evaluate it, and it just takes 5 minutes for installing. And like it's a SaaS-based solution, and within an hour you can see the power of AI. So it's really a quick thing that you can set up and check out for your organization, and it has 0 VM footprint, and you don't need to install any components of CyberArk either. So the question is, why CyberArk? So CyberArk provides a rapid, simple, consistent solution for all the cloud identities, for all the identities across on-prem, cloud, as well as hybrid environment. And we provide the most complete solution in the industry. And here is the view of our portfolio, where we not only secure the privileged access on-prem, we secure it on the cloud, in the hybrid environment, in the multi-cloud environment as well. We have a solution which is on-prem as well as SaaS-based. So if you do not want to manage the underlying infrastructure, you're most welcome to go for the SaaS solution, so that you focus on your core business, and the privilege account, the security part, you get it as a service. We have solution for the third-party remote access, where we eliminate VPN access for the privilege access management solution connection, and we provide a zero trust based solution for connecting to the privilege access management solution, CyberArk solution. We have application access management solution in place, where we remove the hard coding from the applications, and we provide the password to the database for application to application connection, application to database connectivity in a seamless manner. And there's no hard coding of the passwords needed in the code anymore. And the hackers cannot just get to the source code and read the passwords. Same, we also have solution for the access management, which includes our multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, as well as lifecycle management. And there's endpoint privilege manager, which is a solution for securing the endpoints, both the servers as well as the workstations. And in a few minutes after my presentation, we'll get to know more on this from Jitson. So CyberArk follows a security-first approach, which is AI-powered, and it provides a frictionless experience anywhere. And why frictionless is so important? Because we know that a lot of users, they are not adopting security because they think that it's a hindrance to their operational work. And that's what CyberArk keeps in mind. Our R&D team is highly focused on ensuring that our solution is not only securing our customers, but doing so without impacting the usability. So we keep usability in mind and provide a solution which is easier for user to use and access, so that there is adaptability and adoption to the solution. And the reason why customers have been choosing us is because innovation is in our DNA, and we created this privilege access management space over 2 decades back, way back in '99 when we came up with our digital vault. And since then, we have continuously been innovating. So while we are over 2 decades old company, we are still a startup. We work as a startup. We keep on innovating and keep coming up with new products every year. We keep coming up with new versions. And we pride ourselves, that at CyberArk, that we stay close to our customers and their evolving needs. And that's why we keep on innovating and keep on improving. And that's what makes us the leader in the space. We are number 1 in the privilege access management space, with over 6,600 customers and over 50% of the Fortune 500 customers choosing CyberArk to secure their privilege access management. And in fact, over 40% of the customers who have been breached, these organizations who have been breached, anytime they look at CyberArk to secure their privilege access. The industry analyst community has also recognized CyberArk's leadership. And as we can see from the recent Gartner Magic Quadrant report, which was released on 4th August 2020, we continue our leadership position. And CyberArk has been named a leader in Gartner 2020 Magic Quadrant for privilege access management. And we have been positioned both highest in ability to execute, as well as furthest in completeness of vision. And not only Gartner, but Forrester, KuppingerCole, IDC, they have all ranked us right there at the top, ahead of competition. And security is a team game, and at CyberArk, we know it very well. And that's where we partner with a lot of other OEMs, and through our C-Cube Alliance, CyberArk provides over 250 joint solutions, which is much more than any other PAM vendor. And we have over 200 plugins for faster implementation of CyberArk's PAM solution by integrating with your existing devices like SIEM, ticketing solutions, etc. And CyberArk is not only chosen by the BFSI segment, where we have top 23 of the 25 banks choosing us. We have been chosen by almost all the verticals, the top performers, top 80% of all the verticals, whether it's pharma, whether it's manufacturing, telecom, insurance, energy sector. All the top customers, the top 80% have gone for CyberArk to protect their environment to the privilege access, right? And customers can get started today leveraging CyberArk's capabilities to secure infrastructure and operations. You can secure your workforce, digital workspaces. You can secure your applications. And CyberArk keeps you safe by delivering a security-first approach that is AI-powered. And why is this so important, and why is something that CyberArk can deliver? This is because in today's mobile digital cloud world, all identities or users, they become privileged under certain conditions. And at CyberArk, we know that very well. And CyberArk's least privilege approach enables users with just the right level of access at just the right time. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to me. I'll hand it over to the moderator now.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that presentation, Sumit. Very insightful indeed. And so now next we have Jitson Ong. So Jitson Ong is from CyberArk and is the security architect. So over to you, Jitson. He will share with us more about on this topic, defense in depth. So please stay tuned. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I just want to make sure that I'm sharing my slides before I start. And thank you, Dr. Sriram, for the introduction. Okay, once again, a very warm welcome, everyone. I hope that you can see my slides right now that I'm sharing. Very honored, very excited to be here presenting to everyone in the Data Security Council of India. My name is Jitson Ong, as what Dr. Sriram has introduced. I'm a solution architect of the CyberArk software in APJ. So the question really comes in today for my part is that, are you affected by the pandemic and must work away from home? I guess majority of us are, or perhaps, you have to deal with enabling people to work remotely. So if this is your concern, I strongly encourage you stay with me over the next 30 minutes when I will start to talk about some of the challenges and some of the problems that potentially everyone could encounter during this period of time. Okay, a quick snapshot of what we'll be covering in this particular session. First, we'll be talking about what within the digital workforce remains unchanged in 2021 to this year, and the challenges that revolves around it. So more often than not, when we talk about a digital workforce, it actually signifies the adoption of innovation and technologies, right? And we're going to examine how each of these IAM permissions that within these innovations, such as the cloud, such as the DevSecOps, the IoT environment, could potentially equate to a possible attack path into the organization by the attackers. Okay, so after identifying all the challenges, we're going to cover a few scenarios whereby CyberArk could help to provide what we call a positive business outcome for you. Okay. Actually, I got this article from BBC dated sometime in October 2020. And I've been using this slide for a lot of my presentations because I think that is a very ideal way to set the stage for the digital workforce, right? So the initial thought that we have was that we are working from home to battle COVID-19 through social distancing. But the current situation, if we fast forward after about a good 18 months, the physical offices could be a thing of the past, right? This is especially true where we have witnessed that the possibility of executing a lot of our work away from the physical office locations. So we in CyberArk also have discussions with CIOs and organizations to how to help to facilitate making work from home a more permanent or prolonged act policies within organizations. If I were to put that into a context, just for example, in Singapore, APJ, Asia Pacific and Japan, our headquarters in Singapore, we have recently converted our office space into hot desking, right? Because we have to facilitate and support this ad hoc office usage requirement. So this was a very big change for many organizations and personnel as well, right? Because battling a new strain of global pandemic, that's one thing. But at the same time, you have to enable your business digitally, right? Whereby some of the organizations, some of the business have never done that before. So that and this becomes like two different problems at the same time that everyone have to handle during this period of time. Then the question really comes in is that do we then leverage on the strategies that we have on the physical offices and tries to use it to protect our digital workplace, which is away from the office? So the last 18 months has been very eventful for many of us, right? COVID-19 has driven organizations to transform their business digitally and the birth of the digital workforce for nearly all industries as we speak. And that is that given that if you want to survive, right, what we observe is that during this period of time, there is no lack of security breaches that happens also, right? Notable observations from Reuters, Gartner, you will see here is that they will indicate that security risks such as hacking, phishing, and ransomware attacks will increase significantly during this period of time. Okay, so hackers has been very, very busy too. You can see here, right? There have been just more security incidents that happened just last year. And I gave up updating these slides because there's just way too many. So with majority of us continue to work from home, away from the office this year, my perception is that this trend will look to continue for 2021. But despite all these concerns happening around us, I believe that every cloud has a silver lining, right? So every situation, there is always an opportunity, right? We have, just like every situation here, we learn and adapt. So the digital workforce is a very classic example of what we see in today's situation. So what we see here is that the attack technology changes over time. If you look into all the different cybersecurity breaches that happens over the last 18 months or more, you see that the technology always changes. But one thing that never changes or never change is that the attack path, right? Regardless, today we are talking about whichever security breaches, no matter how sophisticated it is, you'll notice that one thing is that the path, the methodology that they take never changes. So that is the good part about it. Okay, so now with that, allow me to identify and share with you 4 main challenges that I see in the digital workforce today. And I'm going to work through with you all these challenges and share a little bit more in terms of this challenge, and potentially you can see that how this could potentially relate into your environment. We're going to start off by talking about the number one challenge today, which is the remote workforce, right? So these are the employees having to work away from the office due to the pandemic. And looking at the background, probably you will be smiling right now because some of you would have been nodding the head as well, right? Because it was tough for you to work at home. Juggling between work and family is really no easy task, right? Myself back then, over the last 18 months, is that I have 3 young kids and having to work, perform WebEx calls like this and making sure that they do not interrupt, making sure that they are well looked after becomes a very, very big challenge for me. Okay, so on top of that, some employees have never worked from office away from offices before, right? We're talking about the likes of perhaps the admins in your company, the finance personnel, over the period of working, they have never worked outside the office space. So all these changes their landscape and becomes a whole new threat, a whole new experience in this time of global pandemic. Next, I talk about is ransomware. So this is a very key, big concern to many of us, right? Especially when it comes to organizations, management, as per se, while we want to enable our employees to work from home, making sure that they are safe, but at the same time also want to make sure that they are secured. right? They are secure, making sure that they do not fall victim to ransomware attacks that we have seen so prevalent, we have seen being so common in today's environment. Next, ad hoc vendor access. So vendors, partners, so these are the ones that they are very important in our business ecosystem, right? Because we rely them very extensively in our daily operations. Let's put it this way, right? So having a digital workforce means that perhaps they are also working from home. They are also working away from the offices. And we need to find a new way to enable these vendors to perform their tasks in supporting our daily operations, right? So this potentially could be one challenge that we will be focusing on as well. And finally, the last challenge I want to talk about, before I jump into the details, is about this hybrid web application workspace that we are working on, right? So in today's modern digital age, we leverage on a lot of web-based applications, cloud infrastructures, and more extensive than ever before. So these are actually propelled organizations and its productivity into the next level. So, like it or not, many of the organizations are actually doing that. So we get to work through our mobile phones, right, and iPads, right. Very, very rarely right now you can see that we actually need to open up our corporate laptops, log into the VPN, and perform our day-to-day tasks, right? Because we see that more and more works can be done by the mobile phones and tablets. So, but however, this becomes a double-edged sword, right? As the hybrid web application workspace, okay, also contribute to certain challenges that we're going to talk about that later. So all in all, these are the 4 challenges which I'm going to jump into details. With the number one I will talk about is the remote workforce in detail. So as we covered earlier, these are mainly the employees, the staff of the organization. But because of the COVID, we have to work away from the physical office, right? Like we used to. So to date, to be honest, this is actually my 16th month. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, 16 months that I have not stepped into my physical office in Singapore, right? And I used to fly to India very, very often as well. So this has not been done as well. So we can actually classify all these remote workforce into 2 subcategories of users. So the number one is the IT support staff, right? From the IT support administration perspective, it was a tall order because right now you suddenly have to enable majority, if not all your users, to be able to work from home independently. So you can just imagine the need to provision VPNs, the local operating system privilege to install softwares, and security policy changes to make sure that third-party network connectivity right now is allowed. So all these are very big changes that the IT support team have to manage in a very short period of time. So this is one challenge that we talk about. The second group of users, subcategory users we talk about here are the employees. So we talked about earlier, these employees could be your finance, your administrators, your admin, it could be your HR, right? Suddenly they have to use new technologies like VPNs, right? Given the local administrative accounts or rights for them to perform their tasks, which they don't even know how to use it in the first place, right? Because they are not tech savvy. So these are likely to perform their tasks as usual, but as time goes by, you notice that this group of personnel, right, because we are working from home, creates comfort, and reports have shown that the focus of security, which never was high in the first place for these users, become even lower. So they become even a priority for the attackers to target them first in such situation. So the very interesting thing here is that most of the attacks start at the endpoint, and that is really key, right? Why this is important is because the enable of the remote workforce plus a natural tendency to overload securities open up a wider range of targets for the attackers to gain access, to gain entry into the prospects victims' network easily. So as we discussed earlier, the attack technology changes, but the attack path does not. So what the question then comes in is that what is the constant factor that all this endpoint has, right? Regardless, you are the IT administrator, you are the CIO, you could be the HR, the HR manager, but that makes it very attractive for the attackers to target you, right? So this is a constant question that people will always ask. What is it in everyone's laptop that the hackers, what makes it a viable target? right? Really, the idea here is that it is about admin rights, right? To enable users to work effectively from home, away from the office, it is a common requirement that local admin rights needs to be assigned to the user, if not all. As you can see here, having the local admin rights will means that probably the user will be able to perform system changes, configurations here, like we talked about earlier, able to log on to your home network, able to install your home-based printer, for example, right? Because you'll no longer have to connect back to the office to do certain printings, right? Especially when it comes to the HR, the finance, right? So this becomes a problem. Why so? Is because having that local administrative rights also allows the capability to install malicious software onto the endpoint, right? What we have observed is that more than 95% of the malware actually requires local administrative rights to gain persistencies, right? To be effective, in short, right? For example, you talk about your system level keyloggers, facilitating the likes of pass the hash attacks. All these actually requires administrative rights. And of course, once this is done, a very quick know in terms of how attackers work, like we talked about earlier, is that we know that the attack path does not change. We know that once the attacker gains access to their particular endpoint, which is compromised, the next thing that they will do is to gain the privilege access, right? Try to elevate their rights to perform more attacks, to perform more actions onto that compromised machine itself. So based on this, very interestingly is that, this is dated in 2018, right? But by the threat landscape report that CyberArk has done, is that more than 85% of the enterprise have not removed the local admin rights. That was about a good 3 years back, right? Despite them knowing that all these challenges, all these vulnerabilities that potentially could be followed on. So this is a very interesting site. Why so? After we identify that local admin rights is the bait, is the thing that the attackers are aftering. But at the same time, this is something that, what I call that complications. We cannot do without it, right? We cannot do without the local admin rights because we need it for our day-to-day operations, like it or not, right? We require it because we no longer have the capability, have the flexibility to liaise with a support engineer, right? Could potentially back then, if you're working in the office, the support engineer could be located in the next building or next floor, right? So having them to support you to perform certain tasks is easy, but right now it is not, right? So the question then comes in is that with this, do you really want to, just because you want to install a home-based printer, you want to set up a call, set up a support ticket with your support engineer and schedule a time so that he'll be able to remote in to perform these tasks, or you want to have the capability to perform these tasks by yourself, having the privilege, right? So this is a very common question that everyone will ask themselves, or the management will ask themselves as well. Do I want to right now expand or make sure that my IT support team have the capacity to support all my users, right? So this is, I'm not sure about you, but personally for me, taking away the CyberArk logo, if I ask myself as an employee, I definitely want to do it by myself, right? I would not want to schedule a call 2 hours from now, having to wait for the support engineer to remote in just to do an install of a driver. It doesn't make sense because there's so much effort needed to maintain to synchronize the meeting, and to a lot of communication time is being wasted just to do this, right? So the next challenge comes in tying very closely to the previous account, the local admin rights that we talked about for the remote workforce, right? Which is ransomware. Very interestingly, they tie very closely hand in hand. And the reason why is because what we see here again, by the observations based on COVID-19, is that we are seeing that an increased attack, an increase in terms of all kinds of attack on employees, the remote employees that we talked about earlier, okay, in particular when it comes to ransomware. This is the highest, right? And it is not just about CyberArk saying that. We have seen reports from Gartner, we have seen reports from third-party researchers showing that this has been constantly on the rise over the last 18 months. And I just want to quote a very simple example here. During this period of time, just last year, while CyberArk was sharing about this, I think what very interesting comes up is that attackers know about the public, the general population wanting to know about coronavirus more. So there's actually this ransomware virus called the coronavirus, right? That was being introduced during this period of time. So just imagine it could be a phishing email that comes through telling you more about coronavirus. And I guess that majority, if not many of the users, okay, seeing the topic, okay, judging by back then, 12 months ago, the situation, they will quickly open up the email, click on any possible attachment or link, trying to understand the current situation. And that becomes a very good, easy trap that the attackers used to gain access and compromise the victim's endpoint. And to make matter worse, we have what we call the double extortion ransomware attacks, whereby not only the attackers just encrypt the data and force a ransom from the victim. That's a typical way how we see things work. Is that they, after that has been paid, the next level, the next round of extortion comes from is that the attacker is demanding another round of ransom from the victim. Otherwise, whatever data that was compromised on the endpoint will get published online, right? So just imagine your credit card details. If this is a HR or finance endpoint that got compromised, potentially the payroll, the finance records will get published online as well. So this becomes that the victim has no choice but to pay the ransom twice, gaining the name of a double extortion ransomware attack during this period of time. Very interesting. And of course, a little bit on the high side of the ransomware is that we all know that the usual way, the primary way of propagating impact, immediate business impact, because of the loss of the data, right? So this is a very quick overview in terms of ransomware, and I just want to share with you that look, this is very easily being compromised or very easily being succeeded by the attackers when it comes to the digital workforce. The third challenge, if I were to shift the gear from the initial remote users, internal employees, right now outside, we talk about our vendors, our partners that support our daily operations, as we talked about earlier. So this could be your network engineers, your firewall engineers, anybody that's going to support you outside your organizations. So in the past, what we do is that we can actually schedule meetings with them, right? Making sure that they come into our office or meet at the data centers. But in today's context, such an arrangement is very unlikely, right? It is to be avoided if possible. Okay, so but however, there's really still a need to get the work done, right? So that becomes a question. Vendors could be leveraging on working remotely as well, as we talked about, and they no longer need to wear the uniforms and badge to identify yourself. It could literally be anybody on the streets, if they can still come out on the streets, right? It could literally be anyone out in the public, right? So this means that we need to provide a new way to for the vendors to perform the tasks. And most of the time, these tasks actually requires very high, I would say, privilege or permissions. Okay, and I'm going to talk about why this is so. Okay. So setting the stage in terms of these ad hoc vendors, I think we need to understand some of the considerations, some of their working environment, working characteristics, and then some of the challenges that revolves around why they are concerned when it comes to the digital workforce. Really, the number one thing talk about here is that vendors access critical systems a lot, right? We talk about how they could be a firewall administrator, they could be your network administrators, and the likes of it. So they access all your critical systems for a variety of reasons, and to capitalize on your core competency, you actually get the best of everyone's engineers and services, and then to support your operations. And this is very common as what we see in today's organization. that actually creates a very high requirement for the vendors to access all your critical systems in order to do the job well, right? And of course, remote access then becomes very unsecured and difficult to manage and track, right? Because the management of these users is cumbersome, because ultimately they are not part of your organization. You cannot put them into your Active Directory, and so this becomes very, very challenging. So then it also becomes a situation whereby we need to ensure, meaning the organization yourself need to ensure that the vendors that you employ also bring the security onto the table when they access your systems. So this becomes a constant threat, and we have no visibility what they do when they access the servers, because ultimately they do not belong to our organizations, and they do not log in as what most of the users does. Okay, so this is interesting. Next is that we understand that the workflow is very dynamic, and often they only access the certain servers, critical systems, for a specific period of time only, right? They are not likely to stay on a very critical servers for days and months, right? I guess you could be looking at only days or perhaps hours. This is typically how an ad hoc engineer or ad hoc vendor works. They come in, they perform the jobs for a couple of hours. Once they are done, they log off. Okay, so the idea here is that then with that, managing VPNs for them, it is not ideal, because VPNs actually creates a inherited trust, right? And for these remote vendors with network access, which is sometimes all they need is for certain system and applications within the organizations. So having a VPN access seems to be overkill for them. And of course, if you were to leverage on VPNs and username and passwords, making sure that these ad hoc vendors are part of our Active Directory, it will mean that there'll be additional efforts, additional workloads onto our IT support team, right? Because you need to ship them the VPN tokens, you need to create the Active Directory account for them, and then ship out the passwords individually. Just more and more work, which I guess at this point of time, the IT support team might not be putting that as a very high priority. Because remember, we talked about how to enable, making sure that your internal employees gets to be able to work first. So this becomes a constant challenge, right? And of course, allow me to share why the legacy technology of VPN isn't the ideal way to answer to this ad hoc vendor access. As we covered earlier, what happened here is that vendor access is very, very dynamic, very, very changing, always changing, and it is difficult to manage. Most of the time, what will be important here is that VPNs actually creates inherited trust, right, onto the network, onto all your systems. So this becomes a situation whereby it is an over provision of access for ad hoc vendors, and it also makes it a very attractive target for attackers. As you can see here, the attackers will know that if I as an attacker is able to compromise an ad hoc vendor laptop, right, it ultimately means that I would have access onto the target customer's network with inherited trust given by the VPN. So that's why we in CyberArk view that having a VPN to grant the access is an overkill, especially when it comes to ad hoc vendors. Right. The last one we talked about, the challenge is today is about the hybrid web-based application workspace. I don't want to scare you, but this is really about some of the current working environment that some of the users will have, right? For the rest, I guess your organization is working towards this, like it or not. And then the simple illustration is that, okay, there is a very strong adoption of cloud services, web applications, right? You can see from here the likes of HR, Salesforce, talk about AWS, Azure, Office 365. These are the common ones that we know, right? As we are consuming these web applications more and more, it comes forth as challenges for the digital workforce. Is that the first we talk about is access, right? It's about giving the passwords, right? Because all these individual applications actually requires unique passwords for logon, right? So imagine if you have 10 different applications, probably it means that you have 10 different unique passwords to remember. Not very ideal, right? Especially when it comes to all these applications, if there's a 2FA, it just make the matter worse, No, it is just very, very difficult. And the next part of it, when it comes to such a web or cloud adoption, in the past, there's only emphasis in protecting the access, the accounts for the likes of administrators, DBAs, right? Like what Sumit mentioned earlier. When CyberArk first started 20 years ago, that was what we have been always be concerned about. But however, the security landscape actually changes, as what in today's context, we know that all identities can be privileged under certain conditions, right? A user account to the Salesforce or to the payroll could be just as valuable as back then we talk about the local admin or the DBA accounts. Because to the eyes of the attackers, this is just as valuable as important for the organization. So because ultimately these users, they hold unconstrained access to the applications such as payroll, such as SFDC. So compromising this user will perhaps means that there'll be an unconstrained access to all these particular access of data. Okay, so before I end off the challenges for the digital workforce, I just want to touch briefly on the various cloud offerings, IAM permissions that we talked about earlier. Cloud offerings such as Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud, GCP. These are the three main service providers when it comes to cloud. And you can look at, they provide a very extensive permissions, permutation of permissions, IAM permissions, and there are literally thousands of it. So this granular offering of privilege actually provides a very strong level of security, okay, into the platforms, right? So don't get me wrong stating that they are not secure. But the challenge really comes in here is that this actually requires a lot of experience and a constant transfer of knowledge of what has been assigned and what needs to be done next. Otherwise, there will be just gaps, all right, in the platforms when it comes to privilege. Because when it comes to the attackers, all these IAM permissions actually represent a potential attack path into the organizations, right? So I have just quickly covered the various challenges when it comes to the digital workforce, the four main challenges and some parts of the details of it. What I want you to do right now is really to follow me through the next 5 slides, whereby I'm going to show how CyberArk could potentially help to answer to these 4 challenges that we talked about. Right. A very quick recap on the first challenge is about the digital workforce. It's about empowering the users, having the privilege to do their day-to-day operations, and at the same time having the enough rights so to minimize the attacks surface. So allow me to share with you how CyberArk is going to do it. So this will be a demo video. My apologies if this is not playing very well in your laptop. Let me know if this is happening. Sorry. So you can see here, John as a standard user is a very classic example of the remote workforce. So you can see basic application install here actually requires administrative rights. So if you talk about a more advanced like system change of date time, we talk about, for example, if you want to change your firewall rule settings, all this actually requires administrative rights. And that actually propels organization to give them the local admins. But what is different now here is that CyberArk actually helps John to perform all these tasks by elevating his rights as and when required. So notice this time around when John tries to install the Adobe Reader again, there's no prompt of the privilege. Okay, because at the back end, CyberArk helps to elevate his rights. As a standard user, elevate his rights to perform these tasks. So similarly, if you go on to the likes of changing the system date time, it is exactly the same concept, right? There's no prompt. Into the more advanced experience here, for firewalls, you could actually enforce the likes of a workflow to make sure that you have some reasons in terms of why the user is performing these tasks. Next, ransomware. I'm going to show a very quick demonstration in terms of how CyberArk could potentially help to prevent and stop ransomware attacks. Okay. So what you can see here is a very simple view of the console in terms of our solution and in terms of just a simple click to turn on the ransomware protection. Next, we jump on again to the workstation of the user, a sample of the ransomware and a folder of a pretty sensitive document. Right? A quick glimpse in terms of the documents that is essential to the user. In this case, is Mike. Okay, so it seems like this is just a list of information. And we're going to start the ransomware sample, right? As usual, this typically run off at the back end, transparent to the user. But because of demo, I'm going to make it transparent here. I'm sorry, make it easy to see. So as a general characteristic, you can see here is that we're going to encrypt the data, but this is effectively being blocked by CyberArk. Why so is because we actually separate out the privilege for the applications, making sure that yes, the application could run, but what kind of privilege that this application has is being managed by CyberArk, making sure that, for example, when the ransomware or any unknown application runs today in your environment, it could be no access to your internal network share. It could be no access to your C drive or even out into the internet. So this, in a way, helps to prevent ransomware attacks. As we have talked about earlier, is that the attack path doesn't change. We know that these are some of the common characteristics of ransomware. We are helping to prevent that from running effectively. Right. Third, we talk about a secure native access, right? This is a challenge in terms of the ad hoc vendors today. You know, instead of just giving them the assigned VPNs passwords to perform the task, how do we then allow what I call on-demand, just-in-time access for the vendors to connect to the target servers remotely and securely? So again, you can see here, this is a picture or a demo video of the vendor's laptop. So what we leverage is the RDP app on the vendor's laptop with the smartphone for on-demand. So the first key step is to authenticate the user via the smartphone biometrics authentication. So once successful authentication, you can see that ad hoc vendor gets to choose the assigned target servers with the pre-defined accounts, right? So this is very seamless. So this could also be assigned with workflows for audit purposes, right? So after which you can see what happens next is that a secure native access from the vendor workstation creates the RDP connections to the target server itself. So we talk about existing privilege controls like session recordings can also be enforced onto this particular session itself. So the beautiful thing here is that we omit the need to create VPN access, log into VPNs, and then gain the unnecessary inherited network access trust. Okay. And of course, the last challenge we talk about is about the hybrid web applications. We talk about having to remember many different passwords and applications. So what I would like to show you here is that this will be a very adaptive and secure single sign-on portal to access all your applications, right? So the authentication mechanism can be based on various combinations, right? It could be a scanning of QR codes as you've seen here. It could be even username and passwords. Right, so once you have completed the authentication, you get actually all the accounts, all the privilege, all the applications being assigned to you here. And then with that, it could be a situation whereby, for example, HR Bamboo, whereby the credentials, you no longer need to remember them. It gets automatically being provisioned single sign-on for you on behalf, because this is an application that is being authorized, right? So this becomes ease for the user that they no longer need to remember the passwords. At the same time, they do not create what we call similar passwords that's easy to remember and make it very accessible for attackers. But of course, when situation changes, instead of working in the office, right now you're working from home or using somebody else's laptop, for example, the authentication mechanism could change. Like I can see here, there could be a step-up authentication before you single sign-on onto the HR Bamboo. Because, for example, right now could be, instead of working in my home, I'm working in the Starbucks, I'm working in some coffee joint which is using public internet. Finally, my last slides before I wrap everything up is really about cloud entitlement. We talk about the various IAM permissionings. I'm going to give you a quick glimpse in terms of how CyberArk could help to provide an overview in terms of all the cloud offerings that you guys are the organization is using, and the security permissionings that is being entitled or being configured. So you can see here is a portal that summarizes the various cloud platforms used by the organization today. So all this is within a single panel. You can see in this particular demonstration, we have AWS, we have EKS, Azure, nearly everything. But also what is interesting here is that we also have all this with the risk exposure being identified, okay, given based on your current configuration and assignment. So it is only unique to your organization, but depending on how you configure the IAM. So this actually allows one to understand the security exposure, security risk that you have in your current situation. And then what is also interesting is that depending on each individual platform, if you drill down, we actually give you a quick and a guided way to effectively reduce the security risk, right? Telling you potentially, just like a firewall rule, we have seen that this has not been used over the last X period of days. We CyberArk actually recommend you to turn this off, remove this permission from this particular user. All right. And of course, with that, really the idea here, one of the last slides is to share with you the expected business outcome, right? Regardless of today, if you are helping to protect your organization from an attack, or you are coming here because you have the responsibility to enable your business digitally, making sure that you are helping to transform your organization's approach to work in a manner whereby to better COVID and work away from home. I think all this can be better being mitigated in the first place by first understanding what are the various challenges that a digital workforce could potentially face when working from home, right? So this is important. And after which, identifying all these challenges, next is to identify what are the potential positive business outcome or positive scenario that you want to see from the organization perspective to ensure that the users get what they want, and of course the organization is being secured in concurrently. So this is what I hope to share with you. I know that it took close to about 40 minutes. I thank you for your time. This is the end of the slide. I hope that this has been informative. Again, like what Sumi mentioned, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to our CyberArk representative, and we'll be more happy to follow up with another conversation with you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Jitson, for that wonderful session. Very, very enlightening indeed. A lot of things there. So now we are on to the last leg, which is the panel discussion. Please do stay tuned. We have a stellar cast in our panel here. It's Rohan, who is CyberArk's country director of India and SAARC region, and Dhananjay Khanna, CISO of SBI Cards, Prakash Padaria, who is CISO of PayU, and Mr. Srinivas Mupaneni, Group CIO of Telangana State Cooperative Banks. They bring a diverse perspective to this topic, and which is a very interesting one, which is defense in-depth strategy, protect yourself against the leading causes of breaches, compromised identities, and credentials. So to kickstart this, I'll just start off that as against the philosophy wherein you have one strong defense, in which that attempts to ward off all the attacks, in the defense in-depth strategy, you have a layered approach. Basically, you essentially say that with this you can protect against supply chain attacks and all that. So there are few philosophies here: protect privileged access, lockdown critical endpoints, enable adaptive MFA, and of course secure the developer tools and all that. And there are three parts to this, which are the physical access you secure, then there is the administrative, and there is the technical. So with that, we will get started off without further ado. That the first question is, how do you apply defense in strategy in the context of changing landscape? Work from home, regulations, legacy and new systems, new technologies, new business models, for example, microservices and all, and the ever-growing scale and sophistication of threats. So you may please give your suggestions, probably the suggestions and all. I would start off with Rohan. Hello, Rohan.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Sriram. So we have a little, I would say, expanding the defense in depth structure in terms of what is normally pursued. I mean, traditionally, defense in depth was more looked at as layered approach, more in the perimeter kind of a cyber security, where you would have physical, technical, and administrative layers, which you would kind of look at, and layered in such a way that it makes it difficult for an attacker who has to go through multiple hurdles to really achieve his tasks. And we know that most of our hackers are always are lazy, and they are always looking for easier things. So a multiple layer approach kind of helps to kind of keep these hackers away, unless and until this is a targeted attack or a state-run attack where they have a clear objective of achieving something on a particular asset. Now, from a CyberArk perspective, what we looked at is that perimeter security has been there in play for more than 20, 25 years or even more. And most of the breaches have still happened when the companies have been compliant on perimeter security. They have implemented very, very high secure perimeter, UTMs and all possible intellectual capital which was put in by a lot of companies, and they've still been hacked. So we took a step back and we started looking at what could be the possible reason as to how successful breaches happen. And in a normal attack chain, the attacker is always looking for privileged credentials. Now, if I'm able to get the domain controller access, or if I'm able to compromise on any of the privileged users, then I'm able to escalate my privileges and eventually be able to get control of the domain controller. Now, this is a basic fundamental which have been used for years together by all attackers. And this is what exactly we would say that, the expansion now on defense in depth has to go to the last mile or the last line of defense, which is managing privilege accounts. These privilege accounts now are becoming very different in terms of the cloud environment, work from home, and all the other new elements which are coming. Earlier, when we were only on-prem, you had few administrators who were managing all these things, and there was less of a possibility that these things could be compromised. Now, where administrators are working from home, we're using cloud, we're using VPN, we're using a lot of things which are unconventional from a cyber security perspective, the possibility of this expansion is very high. So my submission to people now is that when you talk about defense in depth, start looking at expanding that horizon to your last line of defense, which is protecting your privileged accounts. And one step forward is look at identity security as one of the major components, which could be a bigger play.
Certainly, that really makes a lot of sense, Rohan, because we need to protect the crown jewels, and the crown jewels are typically kept behind privileged accounts. And with this privacy laws and all coming in, we need to really protect the privileged accounts so as not to cause breaches. So with that, I would move on to Dhananjay Khanna, CISO of SBI Cards. Please do shed some light on your thoughts on this topic.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Sriram. And I will pick up from where Rohan kind of left, where Rohan said about privilege, identity, and things. So, I would say defense in that, in the change circumstances, in my view, actually it has been in the borderless world. Defense in depth is kind of putting more controls on looking for layered controls, but having focus on the data, where the data resides or where the accesses reside. So having multiple controls. So if one control fails, the other controls picks up from there, and it makes it difficult for a bad actor to kind of compromise or reach to the core actually. So keeping it near to the core, that's number one. Number two, keeping it having multiple controls, so not relying on one control. I think that's the key. start with having like a zero trust networks, having putting all your accesses and increasing the PIM-PAM. So before the pandemic, organizations like us were used to use PIM-PAM solutions only for administrative accesses. So privileged users used to get access through PIM-PAM. However, as part of when this pandemic started, we increased the usage of PIM-PAM, and anybody having any PII, SPI accesses of our customer data, we have taken them behind PIM-PAM. So new use cases have evolved in the PIM-PAM area, actually, which have gone beyond the privileged accesses or administrative accesses in certain cases. Again, having our cloud proxies, so restricting access of our users while they are at home. So some of these things are having multiple controls for the users who are no more sitting in the office boundaries. They are sitting in an open environment. They are sitting at their homes. They are sitting outside the office premises. Is something which I think all of us have to look into in the changed circumstances and look for multiple controls to, I would say, compensate or to as a compensatory controls in addition to the existing controls which we had in our perimeter. We used to, as Rohan suggested, traditionally defense in depth used to be on the network layer. We used to talk about multiple controls and controls with multiple partners, same controls putting multiple partners, like two layers of firewalls with two different service providers, etc. It used to be the traditional way when it used to be in the data center centric security. But I think we are no more in that world. I think our world has become much more complex because of the cloud and because of this work from home, etc., etc.
Yes, thank you for your insight, Dhananjay. So next I would move on to Srinivas Mupaneni, who's the CIO, Group CIO for Telangana State Cooperative Banks, on his views on this question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sriram. Listening to the stalwarts like Rohan, Dhananjay, and others. So, defense in depth, what you mentioned earlier is integration of the different security measures that we are implementing.
Your voice is a little faint.
Hello?
Yeah, your voice was a little faint. Yeah, no,
yeah. Is it okay now? Is it
yeah.
okay now?
Yes, better.
Yeah. So, what I mean to say, Ms. Rohan and Dhananjay, when they're telling, so this defense in depth includes the complete security layers at various network levels and also the PIM-PAM integration. So together, if you are able to integrate these, then layered security is a better option for all these things. Then in this current environment, the challenges in the environment like work from home and the cloud, all these areas. So the basic thing is the most vulnerable point what we felt in the organized security environment is the last mile or the last user. Particularly in the BFS sector, now people are able to access through their mobiles, through their laptops, through their iPads, where we don't have any control on the security. So we can control our data centers, we can control our data where it is in cloud. But here, the major basic problem is the control on the end users devices and also end users network security. So their basic problem, what we are understanding is, we need to have complete controls to give access to those people, as rightly mentioned by Dhananjay. So earlier, the PIM-PAM is being used only for the administrators. Right now, there is no option. We have to improve our PIM-PAM and integration with the security devices. And also, when we are using this defense in depth multi-layered security, better to go with multiple service providers who are having different strategies to counter these cyber attacks. So, for example, we have implemented our cybersecurity operations center here, and all our security is a multi-layered security provided by various service providers. So, different firewalls, different VPNs, and different solutions we take from various service providers at different levels. So, our approach is having a multi-layered approach, with different OEMs. and protecting the endpoint communication coming from the endpoint to our data centers.
Excellent. Yeah. Very relevant in today's context, especially of this work from home, as the COVID virus has been attacking everywhere on the online. Then cyber attacks have also increased. Artificial viruses have also increased. Prakash Padra, yeah. Could you please share your views on this topic?
Sure, Dr. Sriram. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I will have two aspects here, quite diverse, starting with legacy system. Now, when we talk about defense in depth, all these technologies are very, very good. New technologies works very well on new operating systems. When it comes to legacy systems, which is spatially, how do you patch them? How do you remotely patch them? We still have systems probably across the world running on Windows XP or Windows 8.1, or for that matter, Windows NT also. These are the risky things what we have to do, or rather tackle them first before even think of defense in depth strategy. Because considering work from home, a longer work from home situations, lots of people are working remotely, and securing these legacy systems are very, very crucial. That was the basic starting point. The next one would be the next generation technologies like containers. Now, most of you would have dealt with Docker and Kubernetes. The defense in depth strategy is required right on this platform. That's very heavily used now, including banking systems are using containers, multiple banks. Containers are so easy to deploy and manage. They are probably giving much more flexibility than the old solutions like virtual machines. And securing those containers, securing those registries, how the microservices are integrated in containers, that is something very crucial. On the last point is there are few things which is still yet to become once the privacy data protection bill goes live, and probably a larger defense in depth strategy is required. The last update what I am aware of is there are close to 80 changes coming in PDP bill, and probably that will reframe the whole defense in depth strategy once this act becomes a law. So, Dr. Sriram, that's my thought on that.
Very succinctly put, and all of them relevant. Actually, it's like a long snake. The head is in the 21st century, and the tail is still in the 20th century. Yeah, there are a lot of investment made into the legacy systems. So we will have time just for one more round in which I'll club two questions. Please feel free to elaborate as you wish. What are the hurdles in implementing the defense in depth strategy, and how do you overcome? And also, how do you future-proof your solutions with the growth of emerging technologies such as cloud, AI, mobile, IoT, and all that? So you may give your top suggestions. So the hurdles in overcoming these, in implementing defense in depth, and how do you overcome that? And how do you also future-proof your solutions so that your architecture remains future-proof, stable and sustainable in face of some, let's say you've sunk in crores of rupees or millions of dollars, and then after that in 3 years some new technologies comes and says you need to rework from ground up. That will not happen. It should be relatively future proof. So again, we'll start with Rohan.
Okay. So, I mean, I would speak more from a vendor kind of a thing rather than a user point of view. And my perspective is how we have seen the implementations and things like those when we kind of have conversations with customers. The reactions that we see. Most of our conversations with CISOs, CIOs are very, very successful conversations, and they're the people who actually understand, are very concerned about how organizations, their organization should be protected. And there is a big plan that we kind of set it up. The challenge starts when the implementation starts, and especially being in the privilege access management, there is always a organizational behavior change which needs to be brought in. So administrators who have been having super access or have super powers, I would say, in the IT space, suddenly start looking at it that I'm going to be monitored, I have to be reporting, I am going to be watched. And those are things where there is a lot of pushback which starts coming in. I think it's very human in terms of if somebody is being watched or somebody's being told, it's like you're under a CC camera, your behavior is very different and you don't want to be there 24/7. But I think there is a big change which we've seen happening, especially during the COVID lockdown situation, where we had a lot of administrators actually coming back and saying to us that their life has been much more easier. So with a tool being available, they're not worried about being watched. Now they are more happy that they are able to quickly do things and not rely on their memory and rely on doing a lot of Excel work which they used to do to manage these things. Of course, the accountability, whether you are watched or not watched, has still been there. An administrator, when he makes mistakes, is still penalized without a tool. There is absolutely no compromise, and I've seen organizations which really take very tough decisions for somebody who has done things for sure with intent. And there are certain times where people miss out because of the shifts that they run in. There could be a guy working in a graveyard shift and he's worked a couple of weeks trying to make things happen, multiple projects, and he makes mistakes. Those are things which the administrators have started realizing that these tools help them. With newer technologies coming in, it is humanly impossible to do everything manually. So CyberArk, if we talk about containers as what Prakash was talking about, we have been able to look at not only the physical infrastructure, but also in the cloud in terms of the DevOps environments, in terms of the containers, microservices. We've been able to start managing those secrets, or what you call it, the privilege access, or the secrets within that, and then vault it and allow an automation to allow to do that. The other piece which we've seen rapidly increasing is the RPA, robotic process automation, which is now picking up in a lot of organizations. And when you have this particular thing, the privileges become an important part of the story. One system, or I would say one bot, could have millions of privileges, which if are hacked, it can bring down your system or bring down the entire organization very quickly. And that is where we've seen those hurdles now getting simplified, where people within the organization, not only the management, but also in the staff, maybe the L1s, L2s, L3s, are quite happy that they have a tool which is able to protect these situations. Of course, how do we make it foolproof is a little challenging, because the technologies are going to be emerging. There is no one rule or one yardstick which can measure everything, and it's going to be difficult to do that. But we have a common agenda, or I would say a common tagline that I would say. We have always talked about common sense in normal life. If you have common sense, then, and it is not common with a lot of people, if we have common sense, a lot of things can happen. I would say it is time that we start developing a cyber sense. And if all of us start having that cyber sense, I think we will be able to reduce a lot of the pressure on the security teams and on the technology players in terms of actually reducing a lot of threats which are there. A lot of times it's just about a little one step back and thinking about, is this something which I need to really click on? Or is this something which I need to put this USB in my machine and check whether what is in the USB is the right thing to do or not? I think this awareness will make a big difference in terms of all the efforts what our colleagues in the cybersecurity space are doing. And it will be able to, I will not say future-proof it, but it will at least get it to a minimal level. And the real threats is what we will spend time on addressing, rather than a lot of unaware or something which were done by mistake, things which we are trying to manage, which becomes catastrophe in the long phase.
Sure. Thank you, Rohan. Really, I mean, these seem to have worked. These strategies, certainly Gartner, Forrester, and IDC have taken note of your work, and CyberArk's solutions seem to be somewhere hitting right spots. And you're also using AI and all this. So the future is going to be obviously vastly different with the industry expanding, IoT and automation playing a big role and all this. So these points will become more important and not. Srinivas, if you have any thoughts on this, please do share them. Yeah. You're on mute. You're on mute. No, can't hear you. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Now, yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So, yes. The major hurdles, Rohan told from the vendor perspective, from from the organization perspective, the first and major problem that we face is the budget for the continuous spending on the security things. So anyway, that is inevitable nowadays. As you mentioned, that cyber sense has to be developed among the people, and it has to be there. More on that, when we are implementing all these kind of new cybersecurity tools or in this defense in depth multi-layered securities, the major challenge that what we see always is the compliance, and also sometimes the legal violations when we are implementing something, and again the user privacy. User privacy is most important thing that we have to see. See, always everyone says that our system should be more accessible, our application should be more accessible, and more features have to be provided to the customers. At the same time, more security has to be inbuilt into the systems. So these two are the most complex thing which has to be integrated. And then again, if something goes wrong, you have seen recently related to some big private bank which is having a lot of problems in the technology, and even RBI has warned them in some of the areas. So where reputational risk is also involved. So when we are doing all these things, we have to keep all the points related to compliance, regulatory, and reputational risk. So again, nowadays the IoT is coming with a lot of technology, and it is accessible everywhere. So there, that also we have to keep in the mind, and again the public safety. So these are the major areas where we need to understand the data privacy. Again, the main pillars of CIA: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So keeping these three into confidence, all the points, whatever that I have mentioned, should be in our mind when we are creating this defense in depth.
Thank you very much, Srinivas. Dhananjay, you're in mute. Hello.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I think in my opinion, the couple of hurdles which comes in defense in depth. Number one, if we start putting more and more controls, the environment become very, very complex. And now with the complex environment, taking those logs, analyzing them, correlating them, writing correlation rules for those multiple. So there is no silver bullet. So there is no one single solution which will do the entire thing. It will be I would say a couple of solutions which we have to implement as part of a defense in depth strategy. So how to correlate those rules, the interoperability of those solutions actually, and last but not the least, the user acceptability both, because defense in that every control which we put it takes away a little bit of user experience. So there is a latency which gets added a little bit, etc. So how to convince the user, the administrator, or the business user that it will not add too much of latency, it will not add too much of like their ease of work will not go away too much, I think. And having that negotiation with the business and the IT fraternity of the organization, I think that is the biggest challenge in my opinion while implementing defense in that.
Thank you, Dhananjay. Prakash?
Oh, yes, I will very quickly summarize it considering the time we have. So Rohan pointed out very nicely on security awareness, right? I'll start from the basic and end at the top risk one. Social engineering. If you look at the data, maximum number of breaches happens due to human error. It could be a system admin, it could be a network admin. They just wrong command, executed a wrong, probably a shell, and the breach happens, right? The next one is spear phishing. The days of phishing are gone, where people used to send mass emails. Now it's all targeted. I mean, you get very targeted email which says, "Dear Prakash," and very, very targeted only on you. So that is something every end user in a company should be aware of it. That's the basic stepping stone. To move further, IoT, the basic principles of security by design in IoT, still probably many players in IoT game don't do it. There is very critical thing called firmware reviews, which lots of players within IoT space don't do it. People pick up off-the-shelf software or probably modify the Raspberry Pis and use the ready firmwares to do it, but probably nobody knows what is inside the firmware because you just flash the ROM and you are up and running. The last one would be the AI. I mean, I know it's the buzzword. The latest attack, what I have personally seen, is AI fuzzing. As AI becomes smarter, there are lots and lots of people learning machine learning and AI. People are learning more. People are becoming smarter. AI itself is becoming smarter. There are attacks like AI fuzzing. What I have been personally promoting is something called responsible AI, which probably there is no regulation around it. Everybody talks about AI, but there is no standard on AI. How do we, as a probably technology professionals, how do we develop AI which is responsible, which takes the decision, which is responsible? So that's my thought on that.
Thank you, Prakash. And these were really brilliant points. The audience should take note because it's all a question of not how much you hear, but how much you take to heart. And these are the key points brought out in a succinct manner. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you very much. There are a bunch of questions here, Q&A. We will be happy to take them for those who stay on now. The inaugural is starting. So what we'll do, we'll have the CyberArk people and all, we will review the question and get back to you. Please leave your email ID and all there, and we will be able to connect with you offline. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sriram. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.